You are watching the first video produced by spiritualabuse.org in several years. I never expected it would be this long between videos, but time can sure fly by quickly. Today I'm going to be sharing with you two books that are helpful both in learning about and recovering from spiritual abuse. I believe that it is extremely important to educate yourself when you have been involved in an unhealthy church. Learning both how and why abusive churches operate as they do will help you to process various aspects of your experience, and it will also help you to more readily see warning signs should you decide to visit other churches. Unfortunately, there are some people who go from one unhealthy group right into another one because they don't take the time to learn how these churches operate. Today I have picked two of my favorite books on the subject, and one is Christian-based and the other is not. The first one is The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse: Recognizing and Escaping Spiritual Manipulation and False Spiritual Authority Within the Church, and that is written by David Johnson and Jeff Van Vonderen. The second is Captive Hearts, Captive Minds: Freedom and Recovery from Cults and Abusive Relationships, and that is written by Madeline Tobias and Janja Laulich. Now, Captive Hearts and Captive Minds was originally released in 1994. It was re-released in 2006 under a different title, and it was revised. The title of it was called Take Back Your Life: Recovering from Cults and Abusive Relationships. I can't really go into any detail with the differences between the books. Take Back Your Life has more pages in it. I'm going to show you pictures of the contents between the two of the books so you can get a little of an idea of how they might differ. But I have not read the Take Back Your Life, but I have fully read Captive Hearts and Captive Minds. Now, what I hope to accomplish with this video is to give you a little of an insight into both of these books, and I will be showing the front and back covers of both of them, as well as the re-release of Take Back Your Life. And then I will show you the content pages, and I will be reading some excerpts from the books so that you can get a little better of an idea and a feel for how they are and the differences between the two. You have probably already realized that The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse is the Christian-based one. Captive Hearts and Captive Minds is the secular-based one. Now, I know some people will get turned off by the thought of reading a book on unhealthy groups that wasn't written by a Christian or secular-based because of how you were taught in your unhealthy churches to distrust all of these people. And I want to encourage you to try to push past that. There is a lot of good and helpful information found within Captive Hearts and Captive Minds. When I left my former unhealthy church back in late 1993, it was a United Pentecostal church. There was very little information about spiritual abuse that was available. The following year, after I had left, I found The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse. It had been originally released in 1991. And so I read it within months of having left my former unhealthy church. And it was difficult reading because it opened up my eyes to what was happening. At first, when I left my former church, I thought it was a local problem, that it was a problem with my individual pastor. And I didn't see it as a problem within the whole organization as a whole. And as I started reading the book, it opened up my understanding to not only what was happening within my church that I had exited, but also the organization as a whole, and also as to other unhealthy groups that were out there. So the subtle power of spiritual abuse, because it was so helpful to me, has been the #1 book that I have recommended for years. And I've given away dozens and dozens and dozens of copies of this book through the years because I do believe that it is very helpful. Now, captive hearts and captive minds, some people may find a little bit more difficult. The beginning of the book is partly dry because there's a lot of psychological jargon involved in it, but you are forewarned in the book that it's there. But there is also a lot of good information that is found in the book. I wish with it that there had been more examples included and that there was more information on Bible-based groups that were in it. But it was a very helpful book as well. I did not read that book until mid-1997. So that was several years after that I had left my unhealthy church. Now, what I'd like to do now is to read some excerpts from the book, The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse, to give you a better idea of what it's like. Near the back of the book, it gives a couple different chapters for people who are trying to decide what to do when they've discovered they're in an unhealthy church. And one of those chapters is called One Response, Flight. And part of the chapter says, how do you decide? How do you decide whether to leave or stay in a spiritually abusive system? How can you tell if it is more helpful to stay or more helpful to the situation for you to leave? Should our response be to fight or should it be flight? In the interest of helping you decide, please take some time to honestly answer the following questions about your present situation. We will tell you before you start that, in our opinion, there is no neat checklist you can use to help you decide. In the end, you have to pay attention to what is going on in and around you and listen especially to what God tells you to do. Listening to God is up to you. The questions that follow are our attempt to help you better pay attention to what is going on. They are based on some of the lessons God taught us as we were faced with this very same question early in our ministry together. Please consider the following ideas concerning the question of whether to stay or leave your spiritually abusive system. You may find that they free you to leave the abusive system if that's what you decide you need to do. And I'm not going to read all of the responses to the questions that they pose, but I do want to focus on a couple points. One of the questions they ask is, does grace really have a chance? The next question is, are you supporting what you hate? And I'm going to read a little bit from that. By staying and contributing your time, money, and energy, are you helping something continue when, honestly in your heart, you disagree with it? We believe that if everyone who was doing this would stop, many very unhealthy and abusive organizations would be unable to continue functioning. We also believe that if there was no such person as God, many religious places would not miss a beat. The next question that they ask is, do you need to be right? And that is followed by, can you stay and stay healthy both at the same time? And I believe that this is an important question. They say this is probably one of the most important questions you can ask. Losing your spiritual, not to mention physical, emotional, and psychological health is not worth the cost. Neither is stressing out your family or neglecting them to take on a dysfunctional system. Many children of spiritual abuse victims suffer neglect because their parents are so preoccupied with trying to carry along a collapsing church. One person described what happened to him this way. It felt like I was hanging on to the ship of our church with one hand and the pier of spiritual health and reality with the other. I hung on tighter and tighter as the ship began to pull away from the dock. In the end, I had to let go of the ship and climb back onto the pier. But in the meantime, my spiritual arms felt like they had been pulled from their sockets. If you find that staying in the system is costing you your own spiritual and emotional health, or the health of those you love, you should leave. The other questions that they ask, and I'm not going to read what they write on each of them, are: can you decide your own limits and stick with them? Do you believe God cares more about the church than you do? Is it possible the system might need to die? Are you trying to help the system even though you are exhausted? Are you able to listen to the voice of sanity? And the last one is, do you really know where to sow? Now I'm going to read an excerpt from Captive Hearts, Captive Minds that is found in the chapter titled Coping with Emotions, and the subsection is called Fear. I have long said that fear permeates the teachings of unhealthy churches. I'm going to kind of skip around a little bit. I'm not going to read the whole excerpt. Fear is the backbone of mind control. Cults control by fear. Fear of those outside the group, fear of failure, ridicule, and violence within the group, fear of spiritual failure or the disintegration of your belief system. Comparing notes with other ex-members is the best antidote to fear. It is easier to recognize that your fear may be the result of psychological manipulation when you talk about it with others who have had similar experiences. Fear often comes in the form of plaguing questions. What if I was wrong and the leader really is the Messiah or all-knowing one? What if harmful events actually do befall defectors? What if the group follows through on its threats? People outside cults sometimes ask, why don't members leave cults if they want to? They aren't physically restrained. One answer to that question lies in the phenomenon known as phobia induction. A phobia is an intense reaction of fear to someone or something that, in effect, can immobilize a person from doing something. Sometimes the phobia causes physical responses such as heart palpitations, dry mouth, sweating, and other manifestations of tension. Phobia induction is a powerful means of control because it makes testing reality a frightening prospect, and because it can cause a kind of paralysis and inability to act. In some groups, members are told that they will be possessed by the devil, die, or become psychotic if they leave the group. Since some cult members believe their leader has supernormal powers, they take such predictions seriously. In other groups, members are told that the outside world is cruel, unbearable, unsympathetic, and they will never survive out there. Review in your mind the training that went on in your group. Think about the kinds of things that were said or taught. Remember the power of triggers. If you are fearful and having panic attacks, review the Disarming Triggers worksheet and some of the other techniques mentioned in Chapter 7. Because you have been warned about the dangers of leaving the group, you may still be blaming yourself for everything bad that happens. Do some reality checking. If the cult is responsible for the bad things that have happened to you since leaving, then who is responsible for the good? Be realistic about your former leader's powers and the cult's actual ability to follow through on threats. If harm from the cult is a real possibility, then take necessary precautions, some of which are outlined below. I hope that this video has been helpful to you. I do plan on making additional ones in the future that will feature other books that may be of help to you as well. Meanwhile, if you have been involved in a spiritually abusive church and you feel that you would like some help and support in sorting through the various issues that are involved, we do operate 2 support groups. Right now, our main one is on Facebook. That seems to be where everybody wants to be. The URL for that is on your screen right now. If you go to there, please read the About section first. We are Christian based, but we allow anybody to join. And then if you do, Facebook will pose several questions to you that you need to answer first before we can admit you. And if you are interested in buying the Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse, Captive Hearts, Captive Minds, or the newer version of Captive Hearts, the Take Back Your Life, if you buy them through Amazon via any of the links on the spiritualabuse.org website, you will help our site to help others in their recovery. There are many costs that are involved in running the site, from the domain name to hosting fees, and then we also supply books free of charge to people, as well as some DVDs at times. And by purchasing your books or anything at all that Amazon sells, if you first go to our website and then click on any of the links that go to Amazon and then make your purchase from there of anything that's not already in your cart, you will help us to help others. And we would appreciate that very much.